Right. We probably ought to throw it open to questions, I think, because we haven't been going for that long, but it is now 8:30. So
yes. We've also got a good segue here, because we've just pointed out the critical thing is important, asking questions is important. And here we are, we're going to open up the floor to questions from you people who can argue with us. I dare you to see that happen in church.
Could we have the house lights up so we can... And now there are 2 microphones at the foot of each aisle, so we get through many more questions if people will come out and stand by the microphone, by either of the 2 microphones.
Yes, line up here then.
So if you could line up in front of the microphones, behind the microphones.
Sorry to ask a contentious question after the idiots we've
barely
had. I'm sorry to ask a contentious question, but I feel that I have to. I was at the amazing meeting in London, and you were asked what we should do when religious nutcases don't just want to argue, but issue death threats, and you said we should all then join in, republish whatever they'd written death threats about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, but I then found out that when there were the cartoon riots and that we had lynch mobs on the streets and my fellow students at Cambridge were actually being investigated by Scotland Yard, you didn't, in fact, republish the Muhammad cartoons. I was just wondering if you could explain. I'm sorry to ask a contentious question, but it's important. Well, why then, you said that we should all republish the criticism that was drawing the threat, but you didn't in that case. I was wondering if you could explain that.
The problem with the Muslim cartoons, the Danish cartoons that outraged people, was that we've actually got 2 issues here. And one is, do we need to respect religious beliefs? And there, I think the answer is an unambiguous no. We don't have to. We should openly criticize all religious beliefs. But then there's the other question, which is, here you've got a Muslim minority that's often very poor, is being oppressed, doesn't have the same advantages as the Christian majority. So there's also the issue of trying to defend their rights as human beings. So it's a clear distinction between, do you protect human beings? And I say, yes, you always do. Do you protect religious beliefs? And I say, no, you don't. And it was just a case that made that very difficult. I now feel that, we should openly publish criticisms of Islam, even if it does outrage the mobs. The fault for the outrage is not ours. That what we have to do is, as I said at TAM, the thing you do there is you point to the people who are rioting, who are killing people, who are breaking windows and injuring other people, and you place the blame squarely on them as individuals.
Thank you.
Professor Dawkins, in talking with various theists on maybe the internet,
Get a bit closer to the microphone.
Not working? Okay. Sorry. Is that working?
Yeah.
In talking to various believers on the internet and things, I've sort of come to think in the same way that if a child reaches a certain developmental stage without having learned language, or some people think morality, they're not going to. I'm beginning to wonder if there's the same issue with the application of logic to religious beliefs, and I wonder if you have an opinion on that, or what you think we can do about it, or if we give up on them and work on the children.
So you're saying that the analogy with language is that before a certain age, children will pick up a language perfectly, and then it's the Kissinger effect. After a certain age, they no longer can learn a language, at least not without an accent. And does the same apply to religion? If the Jesuits get hold of them early enough, then we're sunk, is what. I think that's a little bit pessimistic. I think it's not the imprinting effect is not quite as strong as with language. I think there are many people that would probably disprove that. On the other hand, it is surprising how often one meets people who are so indoctrinated as children that even if they end up highly educated and highly intelligent, they still can't shake it off. I mean, one example that I can think of is I interviewed for television Father George Coyne, who was the Vatican chief astronomer, ran the Vatican Observatory. And it's a long interview. You can see it you can see it uncut on my website, richarddawkins.net. And we agreed about just about everything. And he finally said that there is absolutely no evidence of any kind that there's a God. So I said, well, Father Coyne, why do you believe in God? And he said, because I was brought up Catholic as a child. and I fear that could be an example of what you're saying. But let's be optimistic and carry on with our job of persuading.
Try other ways. Thank you.
Yeah, and I actually know... I know a number of quite fervent atheists who converted late in life. So there certainly can't be an absolute barrier to that kind of process.
Oh, sorry. I've got a godson. He's 7 now, and of course he's attracted and distracted by an awful lot of other hobbies and football and so on. And what I'd like to know from both of you is, how do I take such a very complex subject? How do I inspire so much awe about evolution, which is such a very complex subject, in the mind of a young child?
I'll let you know.
Yeah. In simple terms, I suppose.
Yeah.
Without going to...
Well, there are so many ways of answering that. I mean, let me just try one. It's what I call the anesthetic of familiarity. We are so used to the world that we live in, we've grown completely accustomed to it, that it sort of becomes boring. But if you could imagine yourself being suddenly transported from a completely alien world into this one, and you see for the first time trees and butterflies and birds and humans and elephants and things, you would be absolutely gobsmacked by what you saw. It would be completely amazing. And it is amazing to think that on this planet, which could have been just a lump of rock like most planets of its size in the universe, on this planet, a quite incredible story has unfolded, which is the story of Darwinian evolution. The laws of physics have been transmuted through this odd process of natural selection, never violated. The laws of physics are always obeyed. But nevertheless, over a very long period of time, matter has organized itself into prodigies of complexity, organization, activity, working to stay alive, working to reproduce, and generated these massively complicated machines, which is us and all other living creatures. And the beauty of it is that since 1859, we now understand in principle how it's done. And every decade since, we've understood more detail. So the child today is born into a fantastically privileged time in history, a time when we really are very close to understanding why we exist, and who could fail to be spellbound by that?
Mm-hmm. And I'll second that, but I'll add another qualification here. Is I've raised 3 kids, and not one of them went into biology. And one of the things you have to do with a child is give them the freedom to explore all kinds of ideas. So my oldest got into politics and economics. My second son got into literature, and my daughter got into computer science and linguistics. So it's not just biology. Biology is our specialty, and we can get dazzled by it, and you can get dazzled by it. But there's a whole world of ideas out there, and the wealth of them can entice a child. So just make sure the kid sees everything. That's all.
And thinks critically about it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Good evening. Thanks for coming tonight. The lady earlier mentioned how language and accent, and I was 20 when I changed my accent to become an atheist. But the book that actually sort of brought that change to me was a novel by Chinua Achebe called Things Fall Apart. Now, what book would you suggest to people who are, in search of, more intelligent answers, to sort of get hold of and read and sort of help themselves to, to other than religion? Because God delusion would be one, I guess.
It's on the tip of my tongue. Next May, PZ's book is to be published. What's the title?
Oh, we're fighting over the title.
Oh, okay. So
it'll be a surprise. Just look for my name, big letters, PZ. Yeah.
So obviously that would be one excellent suggestion. As for any other suggestions, I think modesty forbids, really.
That's my job. He's got a complete library. Just go read that. And your new book, which is going to be geared at younger adults.
Well, my new book is due out in September. It's called The Magic of Reality. And it is for young people from 12 to 95.
Mm-hmm. I'd also add that it doesn't have to be books. Kids seem to like television, and there's things you can watch. And I grew up in an era when the big influences of my life were two television shows. One was Cosmos by Carl Sagan. And the other one was Jacob Bronowski's Ascent of Man. Phenomenal stuff. And one of the things I found very influential about them is that this was something where my father would come home from work at night and we'd watch it together. And sharing it with family is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And any of the Attenborough films as well.
Yes, yes. But not the ones that have been butchered by the Americans.
Oh, wow, that is amazing.
Yes.
They revoiced the latest one with Oprah Winfrey. But the wonderful thing is that if you look on Amazon, look at the identical film, the Attenborough version and the Winfrey version. The Attenborough version gets uniformly 5 stars, and the Winfrey version gets virtually no stars at all.
Yeah.
So the marketers just made the wrong decision.
Sometimes I'm so ashamed of my country.
They were out for profit.
Hi, my question is for Richard Dawkins. You touched upon where we... Can you hear me? My question is for Richard Dawkins. You touched upon where we might be in 500 years technologically. I just wanted to figure out sort of where you stand in terms of Ray Kurzweil's predictions on the future. So it's based on the exponential growth of technology and the fact that we're going to merge with technology. We're going to have blood cell-sized devices in our bloodstream, stuff like that. Where you stand on that and whether you think it's plausible. And whether you agree with the timescales.
I'm fond of science fiction, and I think that the future is very hard to predict. And informed speculations by futurologists, I suppose you could call people like Kurzweil, I think they're interesting. They need to be taken seriously, and it could well be true that. Eventually, flesh and blood life gives way to silicon life altogether. And one could imagine a time in the distant future when life forms speculate about the possibility that way, way back in the dawn ages, the first few billion years, there might have been some soft, squashy, carbon-based, water-based form of life which somehow got around to spawning us. Well, I'm interested. I love that kind of speculation, but it is only speculation.
Yeah, I'm imagining 2 robots sitting at this table.
Yeah.
Now that carbon stuff.
Thank you.
Good evening. A similarly speculative question. Where would you like to see the atheist movement in about, say, 70 years? And where do you think it actually might be?
Where would I like it to... Well, I've actually written about my imagination for the future, and I was actually in a documentary that you may have seen, Expelled. Has anybody seen this?
They've gone bankrupt.
Yes, hooray. That was the question they asked me. What do I think will happen? And what I said was that my ideal world is one where you're free to believe in religion if you want, that people will practice it still as a hobby, and that movie, I compared it to knitting, which was a huge mistake because knitters got very mad at me and they've got these long and that really the ideal future for us, what I would aspire to see is that in 70 years, sure, that there will still be churches, there will still people be believing, there will be a majority of atheists, and there will be no condemnation if somebody wants to practice religion just like nowadays people practice poetry. Okay, that's perfectly reasonable. In that Expelled documentary, they quickly cut to shots of, what was it, Soviet Russia and goose-stepping soldiers.
Yeah, Nazi Germany.
Yeah, and they kind of imagined that, well, my vision of the future must be of all the true believers locked up in a cattle car or something. But no, that's exactly the opposite of what I want. It's a future of freedom where you can freely express things like atheism and still get elected president of the United States.
I look forward to a time when we no longer need to call ourselves atheists, when the word atheist will be no more necessary than a Thorist or a leprechaunist. You don't need to say what you don't believe in because there's absolutely no reason to believe in it in the first place.
Right. Or another word I would use is I would like atheists to be like abolitionist, where someday it's just sort of generally recognized. Yeah, you don't need to believe in God.
You don't.
And it's not. It's no more. Religion is in the same position as slavery is now.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Hello. This is a question for Professor Myers. You said that it's highly likely that life on other planets is to be based on carbon, and on this planet it's carbon-based, but there's one genetic code, which is DNA. Do you think that on other planets there could be several genetic codes coexisting along with their organisms, all like battling it out?
Now, yeah, there's an interesting proposition. People have wondered about that on this planet. Did our genetic code... So the question is about different genetics codes. Could you have different codes coexisting on the same planet? And that gets to an interesting question in earthly biology. Did the genetic code arise once and all life descended from that? Or were there multiple competing codes and it's just that one eventually won out and outcompeted the others? And I kind of suspect that there probably was competition. I mean, we see some variation in the genetic code in mitochondria now, for instance. Some mitochondria have a slightly different code. So I don't think there's anything necessary about the biochemistry that says it has to be this particular code. But it may just be simply in the same way as a lottery, that only one person is going to win it eventually. So you could have alternative codes. They could compete, but maybe only one would eventually win out.
Right. My question, I've detected among scientists a division in the utility of actually debating with intelligent design, with the Discovery Institute and that ilk. And there's a division maybe between the two of you. And I wonder, it seems to me that it's very important to carry on that debate. And I wonder why there is that division, that we don't take these people on their home ground. It's a major political force that is trying to influence our lives.
It's a difficult one, this, and I can see it both ways. The argument in favor of taking them on is that otherwise people think you haven't got an argument, which of course is nonsense. The argument against taking them on is the one that was put to me by Bob May, then President of the Royal Society from Australia. And his answer when asked to do a debate with a creationist is that would look great on your CV, not so good on mine. And you do, of course, if you go up on a platform as a reputable scientist with them, you give them standing. And in a sense, as Stephen Gould said, they've won the moment you agree to have a debate with them, because as far as their followers are concerned, what you've done is show that they've got a case, that they are respectable. So one might say, would you bother to debate a flat earther? Clearly not. My feeling is that certainly a young earth creationist is absolutely no more worth debating than a flat earther. And I don't see that much distinction between them and so-called intelligent design people. So my policy at the moment is not to have formal debates. I don't mind having some other kind of less structured argument perhaps with them, but a formal debate where you have 10 minutes for the proposition, 10 minutes for the opposition, 5 minutes rebuttal, 5 minutes rebuttal, that automatically sets up the illusion that there is a real argument going on here, that there's something to contest. And so I've always, ever since getting advice from Stephen Gould about this, that was his policy, and it's been mine ever since.
Yeah, and I agree with that policy. I've been in a few debates with creationists, but it was last year that I decided I wasn't going to do it anymore. The thing is, so the story is I was asked to do a debate, which I was reluctant to do, but when students asked me, I'm apparently a real sucker, and I fell for it. I did this debate where we got up on the stage, and it was supposed to be on the topic of should intelligent design be taught in the schools. And I had a carefully prepared argument, the usual 3x5 cards, stacked up there with everything neatly laid out. It was all very organized. And my opponent got up, and he started rambling on about Jesus. This was his argument. He loved Jesus. And eventually, when we started getting the meat of it, he said these grand conspiracy theories, like he claimed that we scientists are conspiring to get the periodic table of the elements removed from classrooms. Yes, because the periodic table proves that God exists. And at this point I realized I'm sharing the stage with a raving maniac. And exactly as you said, no, it was entirely to his benefit. Although, honestly, it was a large crowd. It was almost as big as this crowd. It was largely consisted of Christians who'd been bussed in from the local churches, and they were sitting there looking very, very sad because their white knight was an idiot, and it was obvious. But still, I really felt like I wasted my time there, and I agree that the informal discussions are great. You don't want to just run away from the arguments. So informal discussions, presenting it on a blog, hey, I do that. Writing it up for the local newspaper, putting it in the op-eds there. Nowadays, when people call me up and they invite me to come out and do a debate, I tell them, no, I'd rather not, but I'd be happy to do a lecture on the same subject as your creationist is and rebut him there. Get the information out, but don't bother with trying to share a stage with a moron. Doesn't help.
Good evening. I had a question for Professor Myers about the hypothesis, the God hypothesis. I was thinking, could we say that this hypothesis is not possible to form because God as a concept is so logically incoherent and vacuous and does not stand any form of scrutiny?
Mm-hmm.
Is that your reason? Is that your reason for saying that I cannot accept it?
Yeah, it's incoherent. The Christian God has been around for 2,000 years as a hypothesis, vague hypothesis. You'd think he would have come up with a test for it, right? But instead what we get is this constant splintering of Christianity into these different movements, all of them mutually incompatible. And there's, in science what you see is a convergence on an answer. You don't see divergence. And when scientists get together and they have a difference of opinion about something, I've witnessed this many times. You'll go to a meeting, you'll give a talk, somebody in the audience disagrees with you profoundly, and what you end up doing is saying, well, here's an experiment. I can think of an experiment. I'm going to go back home and I'm going to do it. And that will settle the answer. And the other person can do a similar experiment, and you end up arguing. And then what it turns into is a paper that pads up your CV very nicely.
Good evening. Both of you are often criticized by people from organizations like NCSE for being strident and all that. And these organizations usually collaborate with churches and start things like the Clergy Project. What sort of impact do you think things like Clergy Project have on teaching evolution and spreading scientific literacy among general lay audience, for example?
Yeah. There is a battle going on in a way in evolutionary scientists, especially in America, over the right tactics, the political tactics we should be using. There are those, and I have a lot of respect for them, like Eugenie Scott, for whom the main goal is to get people to understand evolution. And so they like to take moderate, reasonable religious people as their allies. And so what they want to do is to persuade people, look, you don't have to give up God when you accept evolution. They're perfectly compatible. That's one point of view. The other point of view, which is the one I'm closer to, says the battle over evolution is important, but it's only a skirmish in the larger battle for rationality and for clear thinking, rational thinking, skeptical thinking. And I can't really, in my mind, separate off belief in God, which seems to me to be just a kind of supernaturalism which is unsupported by evidence. I'm not comfortable with sacrificing the purity of the drive for rationality in order to win the local little battle over evolution. But it's a genuine argument. It's an argument over political tactics. Where I get really slightly cross with those people on the other side of that argument is where they say not only is it tactically wise to seek some kind of concord with the sensible religious people, with bishops and so on, you must actually tell them their religion is perfectly sensible, it's exactly as sensible as atheism, and that's going too far for me.
Okay. Where Richard Dawkins gets slightly cross, I get incredibly cranky. The Clergy Project is something I personally detest, and I've written about it multiple times. I understand the sentiment. Let's find a middle ground to draw them in. But one of the things about the Clergy Project is the sermons, many of the sermons are published. They're posted in the Clergy Project website, and you can go read them. And they are appalling drivel. They are not using this as an opportunity to teach evolution. What they're doing is using it as an opportunity to teach about Jesus, and at the same time get up there and say, oh, look at me, I'm so liberal and smart and intelligent and compatible with real science that you will happily expect this bullshit from me. And I really oppose it. I think it's a Trojan horse for promoting religion, not promoting science.
I mean, in a way, we could have our own Trojan horse, because if we let the fundamentalists, and in a way I've got some respect for them, if they can persuade their followers that it's a straight choice between evolution and religion, and you can't have both, then we can quite clearly demonstrate that evolution is true, in which case that's our Trojan horse, because that...
Hi. I wanted to ask you both, I see the news, and it's kind of a battle, in my mind anyways, of religion versus atheism, and I see religion winning the battle one day and atheism winning the battle another day, and I just wanted both of your opinions. Is atheism winning, do you think?
Well, I get most encouraged when I look at the internet and places like Pharyngula. But the problem is, those are the places I look at. And when you do, what I seem to see is a great upsurge of rational opinion. And but of course, I don't go on the religious website, so I could be wrong. I think we're winning. I think it'll be a long, slow process. Certainly, in the broad sweep of history, we're certainly winning. If you compare us with earlier centuries, there are going to be setbacks. There are going to be temporary setbacks, but I think in the broad sweep of history, we are winning.
Mm-hmm. And I do look at the religious websites because they provide blog fodder, and I can say that we are winning there too. That when you look at my site, which is just one of many science sites, science and atheism sites out there, and I'm getting 3 million visits a month. And then you go looking for the most heavily trafficked creationist blog, the most heavily trafficked intelligent design blog. They're nowhere near that. They're like 1% of that. So what we've got, in the United States, I think there's a perception that these fundamentalists and these crazy religionists are out there and winning. But it's an illusion. It's a bunch of Quaker canons out there. They're very loud. They're very indignant, and they're really good at doing things like storming into schools and threatening teachers with lawsuits, which we don't do. And so they get a lot of press, but they're a minority. It's just a very, very active minority. And I think one of the things we have to do as atheists is we have to promote our own activist atheists who are out there, who are out and proud of it, and making just as much noise as these crazy religious people, but we make our noise on the side of truth and reason. And that's going to win it for us.
Join the Out campaign.
Yeah.
I think we'll leave it then. Thank you very much to both our speakers this evening. I would like to invite you all to be part of that rational upsurge that was referred to just now and follow in the steps of Jacob Bronowski and Richard Dawkins by joining the British Humanist Association, which is £35 a year. Not very much in comparison with some other things. And you can join either with the leaflet on your seats or online. You also have little donation envelopes. All donations made in those envelopes this evening and deposited in the boxes outside will go to the campaign against state-funded faith schools. So thank you very much for coming this evening. I apologise again for the delays that were incurred. Thank you for being a wonderful audience. Thank you to our speakers, and good night.